Like him or hate him, he's been very successful. He wants PT standards. He wants body composition within regulations. He wants grooming standards. He wants to clean up the force. You notice a big difference in the discipline of guys at basic from shark attack to no shark attack. You want to go out there and kill people. You want to do this stuff. Like when you get there, you find out it's not that freaking cool. It's all fun and games until you get smacked in the face and people you know are getting killed.
Those generals look nervous. Did you see that video?
The which ones?
The generals sitting in the audience.
They were nervous?
Yeah, they look nervous. Like they're all squirming. Yeah, they're sitting in the seats, stirring around. I was like, oh man, they're probably nervous going there because they had no idea what it was about.
Do you think a lot of the generals feel some type of way about Pete Hegseth because he was a more junior officer and then he got out of the military and ended up becoming in charge of all of the generals?
Right, because he was what, like a lieutenant or something?
I think he was a lieutenant. I don't know if he made captain, but yeah, he was more of a junior officer.
Right.
And now he's in charge of all of the generals. Do you think they have any type of animosity towards that just for the rank aspect?
100%. I mean, higher levels of military like that, they're just politicians when it comes down to it. They just wear a different, instead of suit and tie, they're wearing their uniform with their rack on their chest.
Yeah, 100%.
But, yeah, they're all politicians when it comes down to it. They'll have their own agendas and they're trying to get to a certain place. And just the fact that he completely skipped the chain of command, if you will, he's all the way at the top now. So I'm sure there's a few salty people in that crowd.
Hey, like him or hate him, he's been very successsul.
Right.
He's done a good job with it. So, getting there, you know what I mean? Like his route to get there is very unorthodox, but
can you imagine a lieutenant being like, hey, 500, however many there were, all of you guys, you're going to be in Virginia next week. I'm not going to tell you why until you're there.
Yep.
Can you imagine? Like, that's got to hurt their egos to a certain degree.
And then you're fat. You need to.
Yeah. All of you guys, you look like shit.
I'm tired of seeing fat generals walk around the Pentagon.
Did he say that?
Yeah.
Oh,
100%.
I missed that part.
Yeah, he's like, I'm tired. Basically, I don't want to see any fat generals or fat brass, not in those specific words, walk around the Pentagon. But it was from the lowest levels to the highest levels in the military. He wants PT standards. He wants body composition within regulations. He wants grooming standards. He wants to clean up the force. And that's what was kind of the big premise behind the speech yesterday, kind of undoing what has been happening in the military over the last 6 years. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or 5 years, whatever. So, yeah, I mean, probably a gut punch for some of those because many of those generals are out of shape. They got a freaking pot belly and they were sitting there. I saw something on Instagram. Somebody, they like ordered a steak and they're like, I'm going to recall that steak after, Hegseth said that to me. Like,
looks like you got to take a trip to the Pentagon, start talking to some generals there.
Yeah.
How do you want to do infinite grit?
Yeah. You need to lose some weight. I'll get you right.
I got you. It's too funny. Yeah. I mean, 2 PT tests a year. What do you think about that? Do you think it's excessive?
No, I don't think it's excessive. I think that you don't do PT tests enough as it is. Mm-hmm. I think I did 1 or 2 PT tests my entire time in Special Forces. And I've always loved fitness. There were times where I was focused more on building mass and I should have been focused more on maintaining my run times, like a lot of Green Berets fall into, or a trap a lot of Green Berets fall into, which we can dive into later. But I think if there is a PT test to keep guys honest every 6 months or 2 times a year, then it's going to have people training for the right things, because it's really easy to get into an environment where maybe you're joining the infantry. It's really easy to get past that initial training, knock out your PT test. You're in the environment, and then you're like, oh, sick. Like, I'm here now. Now I'm just going to get jacked. Now I'm going to start training for this. Now I'm not going to stay consistent with training. I'm just going to do the bare minimum. It's really easy to get into that mindset. And I think if there's not a structured PT test or something on the horizon to kind of keep you honest, then you're more likely to see soldiers fall into that. And it happens in group. Like, there are 100% fat Green Berets in Special Forces. That was something that surprised me when I got into the environment. 90% of the guys, probably more, 95% of the guys are super fit, but every once in a while you're going to see somebody that is way out of shape, and you look at them, you're like, there's no way you could even run 5 miles right now. There's no way like you can perform like you need to perform. And it's surprising. Usually what happens is guys will do their first 3 years on a team. Then they'll go to the B team, or for officers, they'll go down to the S2 shop. They'll go in the basement, and they have more of an administrative role for a period of time. You almost have to do like a broadening assignment, so to say. And that's when guys will get really out of shape. So it's not necessarily like the team guys, because if you're on a team and you're fat, you're probably getting kicked off the team. But it's the guys that were previously on a team and now they're in more of an admin role that really start to lose it. And then maybe they come back to a team, a year later, or they go to SWIC and be an instructor at the Q course and they're still out of shape. When I went through the Q course, there were instructors that were like, dude, what? Like, you're fat. You can't tell me to make sure my run times are good. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So on my part, there was some kind of disappointment in that aspect. And I want to be clear, it's not a large percentage, but they do exist.
Just to be devil's advocate, what's your thought on that in relation to like injuries and like health stuff, especially, not everybody's metabolism kind of slows down and you got one debilitating knee injury, right? And suddenly you're not moving as much as you used to. And you reach, mid 30s and metabolism just crashes and it can be a lot harder to catch back up. Do you think that's an excuse?
No. I think in the short term, it could potentially be an excuse. We had guys on my team that had hip surgeries and they went months without the ability to train, but both of them were still fit on the backside of it. We're still, eating right. We're still training. So, I think it's an excuse to an extent, and depending on the severity of the injuries. Like, you can't just look at somebody and judge them and say this guy's a fat piece of shit because they might have had a catastrophic back injury that they're currently recovering from and fighting to get their way back to the team. So you can't just 100% say that. But there were absolutely guys that I worked with who they were like physically capable. They weren't limping around. They could do all this stuff. They were, they were able to jump, they do all this stuff, but they're also severely overweight. So it's those individuals that I think the PT tests on a more regular basis, that includes the run, would help clean up a little bit. Obviously, if you have an injury, you're going to have you're going to be exempt from the PT test for a period of time, and that's completely fine and understandable. And then you can fight your way, you can train, you can get back healthy, or you get, med boarded out of the military. But for the guys that just got complacent, that get out of shape, I think the PT test is absolutely a good idea, even within Special Forces. Yeah. This is coming from an SF guy that hated doing PT test.
My only hesitation is the freaking logistics of doing the ACFT or the AFT, right? You gotta have probably 30 people there, like setting all the shit up, bringing all the weights out, driving the truck over, lining the balls up, getting the rulers. Like it's back in the day when it used to be, push-ups, sit-ups, 2-mile run. It was like, okay, cool. Like we can do that every Friday if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Just trying to find like the manpower to get all that stuff out there. And I've been in units where they're like, you know what, we're just setting up the bare minimum for the weights for the deadlift because it's too much of a pain in the ass to bring everything out.
Yeah.
And so now you're deadlifting 140 pounds and you're getting your 60 checked off on your scorecard. And it's like, well, now that's screwing me over for promotions and all that stuff. So yeah, it's just the logistics of that. I wonder how they're going to manage that, especially when it comes to the entire Army as a whole, not just like some of the bigger units that actually do have those people.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot more investment in strength and conditioning. I know out in SWIC, like for the guys going to selection, going through the Q course, they built a brand new facility with like state-of-the-art strength and conditioning equipment. At 10th group, they built a brand new gym, super freaking nice, which went up just as I was leaving, so I was bummed I never got to use it. But I think if there are facilities readily available, well, actually, let me go back. Like, why not just leave the equipment needed for an AFT in a sectioned off part of a gym, which there's several gyms on base, and then units can reserve it?
Because you can't trust people in the Army.
Well, it's still a gym. They have all of the gym equipment. You're going to say that they're going to steal all that equipment?
Well, not necessarily steal, but they're going to be like, oh, I'm just going to borrow that real quick. Fuck it. It's just for the PT test, and they're not going to put that shit back. I don't know.
I mean, then it would be up to the MWR individuals running the gym. But I think what I'm saying is, like, why try to do it out in the field and treat it like an APFT? Why not just do it inside of a gym. The Army sets up a place where units can run PT tests. You reserve it for a particular morning, which is just a phone call to the MWR, seeing if that day is open, and then you go do your PT test at the gym.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Plus, especially since they took out the overhead ball yeet, so they can hit the ceiling.
Yeah, exactly. So which I actually liked the overhead ball yeet, but
I hated it, dude.
Really?
That was my worst event. Well, I love the kettlebells too. I know. Go ahead and say.
Should have worked on the should have worked on it. Get better at it. Be more explosive.
Yeah. So also basic training changes. So they mentioned they're bringing shark attacks back, doing more intense smoking, and put hands on. What are your thoughts on that?
I liked pretty much everything he said in the brief or in the speech. Obviously, it's very controversial. You're seeing a whole bunch of people come out online and criticizing all this stuff. But for the most part, like, he's 100% right. What is the point of the military? To be a fighting force. So why were we treating it like a political organization and reducing the lethality of the force to check all of these other blocks? So I think him, especially with the emphasis on combat arms, like, obviously if you're a 42 Alpha human resources, maybe you don't need to be held to the same standards as a combat arms soldier. I got that. But especially for combat arms and individuals who are going to be directly involved in a conflict, I think making basic training more of an environment that builds warriors and less of an environment just teaches you how to march and do drill and ceremony is beneficial. Now, I think the way the military ran, the military basic training, especially the Army, ran in a particular way to develop warfighters for 100 years. And then all of a sudden, in the last, 5 years, well, I guess since 2008, there's been a battle going back and forth on trying to lower the bar with basic training. Because, kind of like what we talked about, well, maybe, this is me speculating, but maybe because people are getting out of shape, the society is getting a little bit softer and we need to keep up recruiting numbers. Mm-hmm. But I think if you have an environment that says, we train warfighters, like, if you want to become an infantryman, if you want to become a combat arms soldier, if you want to become a Green Beret, you are going to learn the functions of combat. And in this environment, we're going to teach you that. You're not going to hurt recruiting numbers because you're always going to have young individuals who want to go into that, who want to challenge themselves, who want to be part of that brotherhood. You'll hurt recruiting numbers more from these individuals, and I talk to them all freaking day long, if you make it soft and if you just check the block and if you reduce the standards. So I think it's good. I don't know about the putting hands on thing, but I think shark attacks and being able to smoke people again is great. I wonder to what extent the putting hands on guys is, because I could see that kind of going bad. If you have drill sergeants who are, human and they get emotional and they put hands on a private, what's to say that private doesn't beat the shit out of him and then ruins his career, whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah. You get a lot of, this is always the thing, I would punch that drill sergeant in the face, but in combat arms, like in special forces, you get a lot of guys who come from nefarious backgrounds, who have rough upbringings, who have that propensity for violence. And if you're putting hands on them and shaking them, at what point is that going to turn bad? So I wonder to what extent he meant putting hands on.
Do you know where shark attack came from?
No.
So during Vietnam, when they're doing the draft, they were getting a lot of the soldiers at prisons. And the whole prison hierarchy, right? They're like, I'm boss man versus, they're getting into the Army and drill sergeant's the boss man. And they had to pretty much,
establish
that. Yeah. So it's kind of a primitive thing, but it worked obviously for many, many years. And then they got rid of it in 2020 around COVID time. So
yeah, I
actually had a really unique perspective because, I've told you my story, but for anyone who doesn't know it, so I had to do basic training twice. The first time I joined, I had gotten out during the AIT portion because I shattered my tibia. So I got medical discharge. And when I rejoined again, even though I passed basic training already, they're like, sorry, you got to do it again. You got to start from scratch. I'm like, fuck. So I had to do the whole thing twice. The first time I went was 2012. And then the second time was after they had taken shark attack out. And so I got to see firsthand, it's like, okay, how did people react with it and without it. And without having shark attack, like it was super undisciplined. Like people were yapping all the time, like the entire cycle. Like everybody's just like acting like shitheads and constantly getting in trouble. Drill sergeants hated us, we hated them. Versus when I went through the first time, there was like a mutual respect thing. Like it was like, hey, they're yelling at us, but we gotta get our shit together. And by the end, you're like, fuck, I love this drill sergeant, you know. Versus like the other way around, it was just like there seemed to be missing something there. And so it's kind of interesting seeing that firsthand. It's like the effects of like not having that initial, you know, confrontation, that breakdown.
So you noticed a big difference in just the discipline of guys at basic from no shark attack or shark attack to no shark attack?
100%.
Really?
Yeah, without a doubt. Because there was people yapping in formation, like people were just like, they wouldn't shut the fuck up, right? And so drill sergeant's like, hey, shut up, you know, and like no one listened. It's like, oh, screw you, what are you gonna do? You're not gonna do anything, you know. And
Can't do anything. You make me do 10 push-ups.
Yeah, exactly.
Whoa.
And that's what would happen, right? They'd have us do like 10 push-ups, and then people still talk, and then they'd like, screw it, you know, you guys are hopeless, you know, and they'd come out and be like, you all are the most undisciplined class we ever seen, you know. I'm just like standing
Which
there,
was
like,
probably true.
yeah, it probably was true because of all the changes, but yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, when I went through, there was shark attack, and I can 100% see that happening because guys will take what they're given. And especially in a basic training environment where you're trying to just change the thought process of individuals, you have to have a drastic kind of onboarding to that entire process. So I think it really does set the tone. And also from like a stress inoculation standpoint, I think it's good to have that exposure to the stress of things going around you, because inside of combat, for example, you can only control what is right in front of you. You can only control what you're doing with your rifle. You can only control whether or not you're going to get ammo, whether you're moving to cover. Like there's only a few things that you can control. Obviously you can talk on the radio and things like that, but like in your physical sense of being in a firefight, there's only a few things you can control. And I'm not the most experienced with firefights, but definitely been shot at, got my CIB. And there were times where we were in a firefight and I remember thinking like, okay, that's going on around me. I just need to focus on this. Like you almost, push it aside and like, I need to focus on this right now. Like I can't let that bother me. And I think shark attacks and getting exposure to that stress right off the bat is good to have that exposure of like, okay, they're yelling at me, but I just need to focus on this. And it's like the initial kind of spark point. Obviously on the SF side, you're going to get a shit ton of that going throughout the process. But for, an infantryman, you might only get 8 weeks or however long the OSIT portion of the infantry process is of like that stress inoculation. And then you could find yourself in combat. So I think as much exposure as you can get to that so you can control your actions in stressful environments is better than holding your hand and, making it an easy process to get through.
Yeah. How about the grooming standards? What are your thoughts on that? How important is that? Do you think?
What are your thoughts on that?
Oh man,
what if they make you shave that mustache?
Oh, they're going to. I got shit for it so much. It's kind of I don't know. It's a chance for me to see. Okay, how far can I take this? But yeah, I gotta be a good guy and take it off. So
are you?
Yeah.
Shave it completely off, or
no.
Never do that.
Yeah, no. Come on. You don't want to see what's under here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it started as a joke, and then my wife's like, I actually kind of like it. So,
really?
Yeah. I guess I'm keeping it for now.
That positive feedback loop.
Yeah. Exactly. I just get my dopamine rush.
That's it. But what are your thoughts on the beards and the grooming standards? Do you think it's like if you could keep that mustache, do you think that would be good or bad or a net neutral for the military?
If they said you can keep it, I probably wouldn't want it anymore. No, I guess like I get the point, right? Like if you're standing in formation and you look and everybody's got like their own way of expressing themselves, right? And everybody's got, half-ass beards and ugly-ass mustaches, right? And it's going to look like shit overall.
Yeah.
I have the privilege of being with like a very small unit where people know their jobs and there's a little more leniency, but I'm sure that's going to change just, with the shifting climate, all this. But when it comes to, you have an infantry unit and you got, 100 plus guys there. If every single person looks different and, some people have hair down to their collar, and some people have mullets, some guys a mohawk. Like it kind of looks a little crazy. So everything in moderation, I guess. And yeah.
I agree, and this is probably going to rub some SF guys wrong, but one of the things I really like about the Ranger Regiment is their super tight standards that everyone follows and abides by and respects. Inside of SF, and this is coming from somebody like, I wanted to go SF. I saw the dudes with beards in Afghanistan, and obviously in that type of environment, freaking send it, grow beards, all that stuff. But getting to group, there were times where it's like, okay, if someone's, got some facial hair or beard and he's just wearing civilian clothes all the time and he's whatever, like that's one thing. But there were definitely some times where guys took it really far and they put their uniform on and they just look like a civilian wearing a uniform because their hair is so long. It's, their beard is so big, like it's a little much. And I think there is a point at which when you start testing the limits on the standards, applied, you start doing that everywhere in the realm of your job. And I think SF is a little bit different than most environments that people don't think about. It's like, it is a gray area type of job. Like there is no script that you follow. A lot of times you're given very loose instructions on what needs to take place or what the end state needs to be, and very little guidance, and you kind of just find your way and figure it out along that path. So I don't necessarily think it needs to be like Ranger Regiment standards, but I do think that there should be, a bigger emphasis on the grooming standards, because I do think it has an impact on guys, not morale, but like how serious they take the job, on a day-to-day basis. Usually back in garrison, everyone's going to take it serious when you're deployed. You're freaking doing a job. You're, getting after it. But back in garrison, where Green Berets hate being, and myself included, it's really easy to just like let the standards slide, and you're like, I don't need to do that, man. Like, whatever. And I think it can start to stack up over time.
I will say it's hard to put a standard on something where you could easily just say, you look like shit. What could look, decent and professional. Like right now you have a beard, right? And it looks professional. It's trim. Like obviously it's a full beard. I can't grow a beard. Like it looks patchy. It looks like shit. But if I tried, now I'm like, oh yeah, here I am with the beard. But I just look bad doing it. Like there's got to be like a standard for that too. It's almost like combat shirts, right? Some people should not wear combat shirts because it looks like you're wearing a sausage casing, right?
Yeah.
You're just bulging at the seams and whatnot, versus someone who can actually rock. It's like, okay, like they look like a warfighter. So I think just having that,
like an interpretation standard,
a self-awareness, if you will. Yeah, a self-awareness of like, how do I look today? You look in the mirror, it's like, do I look like shit?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay.
One thing I like to think about in terms of grooming standards for SF guys is working with a partner force. You are likely going to go to another country and you're going to link up with a partner force, whether it's a European partner or South American partner or whatever. And that might be the only time those individuals ever see an American soldier. And sometimes it might be the only time someone ever sees an American. How would you want them to interpret American soldiers and Americans in general? Do you want to show up with like a super, on trim, sloppy ass beard, beer belly hanging over your pants, kind of busting at the seams, messy hair, greasy, smelly? Like, is that the way that you want those individuals on the other side of the world that get very limited exposure to American soldiers to think about us, and view us and automatically reduce the level of respect that they have for our fighting force or our special forces or our special operations? Or would it be better to have a standard? You show up, you're fit, you freaking, and they're like, wow, like those Americans, they got something about them. So I think there's a lot to be said about that. So, in terms of like SF, that's where I think the standards need to be focused more so than just like, you got to do it in garrison just to do it. Yeah.
What standards do you hold yourself to now that you're out, just in terms of appearance and presentation?
Super fit, dude. Just got to be super fit. I I'm like pretty basic, but I just like to have a clean look about me. I'm not someone that like dresses up and does all this stuff. I just like to look clean. I like to look presentable. I like to, I don't need to get all fancy, but if someone meets me, I don't want to walk away from the conversation and be like, man, I look like shit today. Like that was a really bad impression. So fitness is the biggest aspect that I focus on. If I'm fit, that's going to not only project myself a certain way in all of the situations that I come across in life, but also give me the energy to be productive and, do the things that I need to on a daily basis. And then generally just look clean. Like you guys, you'll see me trim my beard regularly when it starts getting straggly, just doing those types of things. Sometimes I'll let my hair go a little bit, but I always try to look 90% presentable. If I were to meet someone today, would they have a bad impression of me or be like, that guy's, smelly and gross? Or would they be like, oh, he's a stand-up dude?
That's what I said the first time I met you.
I know.
I was like, that guy stinks.
What about you? What are your like standards that you kind of seek to uphold?
It's crazy once you get married how things change, right? Like now I'm not allowed to leave the house in slides anymore like I used to. Just stroll out to Walmart looking like a slob. No, I'd say like unless I'm like going to the gym, right? Try not to wear like tank tops. I try to shave my face every couple of days. This is the longest my hair's been in a while. That's why I'm wearing a hat because I can't freaking stand it, dude. But I haven't gotten a chance to go get a haircut. It's like, okay, I shave my sides of my head like every couple of days. Like I don't really like scraggly hair on the back of my neck. I don't know, just like looking like you're trying, right?
Yeah.
Like looking like you didn't just roll out of bed and find yourself at the grocery store and you're like, oh, where the hell am I? Having some sort of sense of like, I don't know, I brushed my teeth today. Yeah.
Removing the external component of it, do you think there's a benefit internally to taking care of yourself and staying clean?
Yeah. I mean, clean house, clean appearance, clean body, right? It all kind of goes hand in hand, right? Jordan Peterson, he says like first thing you should do in the morning is make your bed, right? Because you start getting that positive feedback loop. It's like, oh, I did something right off the bat. And I think that applies to like, appearance and standards as well. And, if you look in the mirror, you're like, oh, like I actually cleaned up nice today. It's going to do something for your brain where you exhibit a little more confidence. Same thing for fitness, right? If you look good, if you feel good, you're looking, feeling cut, whatever, then that's going to have an effect on your persona as well. So
yeah, I agree. Effect on your confidence, effect on your conversations, effect on your belief in your ability to do things. I think when you take care of yourself physically, when you keep yourself clean, you don't have to be a freak about it, but like if you work out, eat well, you feel good in your body, take care of yourself, keep yourself clean, trim your freaking fingernails, like do all that stuff, you're going to have confidence that goes and spreads out to other other aspects of your life. So I think it is important to kind of maintain those personal standards. And I think in my experience, I did get a lot of that from the military. Like I always took pride in looking professional. So
now that you're out, so how do you kind of maintain that? Just
do the same shit. Yeah. Work out, eat well, keep myself clean. I don't think it's very challenging. I think younger guys can, have some challenge with it, usually because they lose that structure of home and they start, their house gets messy. They leave stuff in the sink. Nobody's telling them to do stuff. And I think that's when things can get cluttered and kind of out of hand. But for me, it's just like, now it's just kind of automatic. It's what I've always done. So if I don't do stuff and I feel like I'm not taking care of myself, I will literally feel different.
Mm-hmm. It's like you exercise that. Now that's like the expectation you have for yourself. So
yeah.
How about like fitness? Like what gets you going into the gym other than appearance and doing infinite grit?
Yeah. I derive a lot of my motivation to go into the gym. One, from an aspect of like, I know that if I don't go to the gym and I don't work out, I'm going to be irritable. I'm going to be, short. I'll feel like I'm unproductive. I'll feel this like kind of cloud over me. So I know I have to push myself on a daily basis physically to allow my mind to be able to focus on other things. Now, to kind of drive that in a particular direction, I always have some sort of goal that I'm working towards, even if it's not like an event like a Ragnar or a race or a selection. I'm like, hey, I'm going to do an experiment on myself and try to get down to 10% body fat. And then after I get there, I'm going to do this and I'm going to reverse diet back up. Like I have some sort of thing that I'm testing out of myself all the time. Or, I'll like test out a new split. Like I'll do a, upper lower split. I'll try a whatever. I'll test things out. And for me, that's where I get a lot of my motivation from, because it's interesting to me. Mm-hmm. So I think if you're not training for like a special forces selection or a particular event, and you're just training for general health, one, look at your movement deficiencies. Any aches or pains, your lower back hurt, your hips are tight, and like address those first. But outside of that, like do things that are of interest to you. Like train in a way that it is of interest to you. Train to do something that you want to accomplish. And I think just setting that kind of goal can help maintain consistency, which is obviously where we're going to get a lot of our benefit. If we're just dragging ourselves to the gym because we're like, I know I have to work out because I know I have to work out. Like it's much harder to do that versus like, I have this goal. I'm going to try to get here in, 8 weeks. Like, let's make it happen. Then I wake up in the morning and I think about that goal and I'm like going after it. Mm-hmm. So I like to kind of do those kind of, mini experiments currently to maintain that motivation.
So you mentioned you're on this journey to get to 10% body fat. So do you have a timeline for that? Like, what's that looking like? What are you doing?
So yes, my timeline is November 1st. I started it like early August, and then I cut down kind of too quick, dropped my calories too much, and I used that trend that I was looked at my trend on a 3-week basis, and it was losing between 1.5 to 2 pounds per week, which for me is too fast. I want to maintain that lean mass, so I want to lose, personally, I want to lose like 0.75 to 1 pound per week. Max, and that's going to enable me to maintain a lot of that lean mass, a lot of that strength, a lot of that performance as I'm leaning out. So my not deadline, but my goal is to be 10% by November 1st. So I'm about 4 weeks out, and based on where my current calories and macros are, I shouldn't have a problem getting in there. I might have to extend it out to November 15th because I bumped them back up when I was losing too fast, and I'm kind of using the trend to figure out where that sweet spot is.
Mm-hmm. And where are your macros at right now?
I'm eating 2,800 calories a day, about 350 grams of carbs, 75 grams of fats, and 200 grams of protein.
And how do you time that?
Like meal timing?
Yeah.
So I work out at 5 in the morning. After my workout in the morning, I'm usually trying to get 70 grams of carbohydrates, 20 to 30 grams of fats, depending on if I'm eating full eggs or egg whites, etc. And then at least 50 grams of protein during that meal.
Nice.
So that's like the one that I really focus on, like the timing of it. And then throughout the day, I'll usually start a little bit more carb heavy earlier in the day, and then later in the day I'll be less carb heavy, ideally, and then that's when I'll fill in the backside of my fats.
So you don't eat before workout at all?
No, I train fasted currently.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
How's that been feeling? Is it tough?
Fine. Yeah. If I was short on carbohydrates the day prior, I'll definitely see a reduction of performance. But if you're hitting your carbohydrate numbers, your glycogen stores are going to be topped off pretty well. We can store about 2,000 calories worth of glycogen in our system. So if I'm eating 350 grams of carbohydrates per day, my glycogen stores are going to be topped off. The glycogen stores that are not going to be topped off, our liver actually holds some glycogen, which serves as that quick resource for energy. And that is where we usually pull from while we're sleeping. So if you ate 350 grams of carbohydrates the day prior, you're topped off that evening. Throughout the night, your body is primarily going to pull from the glycogen stores in your liver, which stores about 500 calories worth of glycogen. So in the morning, your 2,000 calories might be topped off, but your liver glycogen might be a little bit lower. So will you see a little bit reduced performance training like I am fasted, especially lifting the heavier weights? Potentially. Is it going to be catastrophic for a 60-minute workout? No. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're doing like 90-minute workout plus, I would definitely eat before the workout, and I would probably take some carbohydrates during it, like Tailwind or, go gels, etc. But if it's just a 60-minute workout, like what I'm currently doing, I've hit my big lifts and then I finish out with about 8 to 12 minutes of anaerobic conditioning. I'm good to train fasted all day long. And then I'll hit that high carbohydrate meal, high protein meal right after my workout.
Oh, yeah. And do you recommend someone getting ready for a selection or a school to try experimenting like that? Or do you think it's better for them to just kind of stick with one macro goal and really see that through all the way to the end?
I wouldn't experiment with like your macros necessarily. I would eat for your goals. So in the previous video, we talked about whether you need to bulk up, lean out, stay the same. So depending on where those calories and macros are, depending on that goal, I would eat for that. I wouldn't experiment with like, I'm going to try keto. I'm going to try carnivore during this selection prep. Like, not the freaking time. Train or eat the way that's going to enable you to increase your overall performance levels. Once you get to the environment, and if you want to experiment with, paleo or whatever, like, okay. But when you're, especially like if you're within 6 months of going to selection, like make sure you are prioritizing nutrition, make sure you are hitting those numbers on a daily basis. Now is not the time to experiment. As from a standpoint of training fasted, so some people with like high intensity runs, like speed day, tempo runs, etc., might notice a little bit slower times training fasted. Personally, I always run faster when I'm fasted. I feel lighter. I don't have any GI issues, nothing sloshing around in my stomach. But if you are going to eat something before you go run, keep it something that is high on the glycemic index, so it gets metabolized into those glycogen stores quickly. So something like honey, something like, my go-to is a banana and honey, and have that about 60 minutes prior to stepping off. Don't eat it and then run, because it's just going to be in your stomach. It's not going to have time to uptake. So, I would say you can play with that. If you're doing a tempo run, try a tempo run fasted. See what your times were, see how you felt. Did you feel heavy? See how your fatigue was, and then try one with a little bit of fuel, some honey and a banana, and see how you felt on that. You might notice a difference. For me, for the shorter runs at least, anything 40 minutes or less, I personally like to do it fasted.
Mm-hmm. Nice. What's your least favorite food? What do you just absolutely hate, but you're like, oh, I probably should eat this, but...
Turtle, dude.
Turtle? I should be eating turtle,
yeah.
But I just can't.
mean, there's not a food that I actually hate.
Yeah.
But the only, whenever someone asks me that, I literally cannot think of a food that I just don't eat. Mm-hmm. I eat anything.
Yeah.
I always say, I'll try anything twice. I literally cannot think of a food that I do not like eating. Mm-hmm. But when I was at SEER school, I caught a turtle and we cooked it that night, and it was disgusting. It was probably one of the worst things I've ever eaten. It was awful. And I was so upset because I had this trap line out. A trap line is like a fishing line with a bunch of different hooks on it.
Okay.
And I was up this little bank, and it was like my baby, that trap line, this entire time. And I was up the bank kind of at our camp, and I heard splashing around in the water. And I run down to the water, and I see the guy reeling it in, and it was a big ass 14-inch gar. And it starts burrowing. When you get them close to the shore, they start burrowing in the shore to try to stop the momentum. And when you're doing that, you can walk out. You don't want to just keep pulling because it's going to snap the line. Well, the guy just kept pulling. He just didn't know better. And the gar got off. This massive gar when we're freaking starving. And I'm like, no!
You son of a bitch.
Yeah. And then I had to settle for a turtle. So I think I was super bitter that I didn't get my freaking gar that I had been chasing that entire time. And I got this little ass turtle that we had this turtle soup with river water. And that was the most disgusting thing I've ever eaten.
That sounds foul. And unethical somehow. I don't know. That sea turtle survived all that time. I guess
not a sea turtle, just a turtle.
Just a turtle.
River turtle.
Snapping turtle. Like he didn't eat you.
Yeah.
So let's hit some questions from the community. So in a time post global war and terror, which SOF unit would you say gets the most combat opportunities?
Right now, I would probably say, just straight up answer, Ranger Regiment. If you're outside of tier 1, Ranger Regiment probably gets the most combat opportunities currently. But I wanted to touch on this question specifically because I think it's common for young men to want to seek combat. I remember when I was a young man, I felt the same way. I was like, combat is a rite of passage. I want to go to war. I want to see combat. But I would caution individuals going into the environment. Like, obviously you want to train, obviously you want to be the best at your job, but don't be the guy that's like seeking combat. You want to go out there and kill people. Like, you want to do this stuff. Like, because when you get there, you find out it's not that freaking cool. And it's all fun and games until you get smacked in the face and people are getting hurt or getting killed. So I got this question on Instagram, and I get the question all the time, like, I want to go to combat. I want to do this and that. Like, I want to go to war. And I always tell guys, like, hey, I am all for you wanting to become a Ranger. I'm all for you wanting to become a Green Beret, like serve as part of the best, learn these freaking skill sets, drive up your lethality, but don't fall into the trap of just seeking combat or seeking war, because you're going to get there and you're going to find out it's pretty brutal.
It's tough because for your entire young life, it's like romanticized, right? Movies, games, all that stuff, and books, everything. And you're like, man, this is awesome, right? I watched Band of Brothers. Look how cool that is. Those guys are epic, right? And you have like this skewed perspective until like you're actually there and you're like, fuck, I can't just pause the movie and walk into my kitchen, see my family, right?
Yeah.
And you're like there and you're stuck in it. And I'm sure it kind of flips a switch in your brain. You're like, damn, this kind of sucks. Yeah, it's heavy for sure. I wonder if that's why so many people get out of the military. I mean, like the actual guys who like did shit, like the real Vietnam veterans, that were out there in the jungles. Like they came back and they all turned into hippies, and peace, love, and, smoking weed and kind of living on their own, hermits in the woods and stuff, versus like the people who, probably didn't do too much. They're the ones wearing like the freaking jackets saying, oh yeah, hell yeah, war, war's the answer for everything. It's just like, I don't know. I think once you actually are exposed to something like that, like it kind of changes your perspective a little bit. And
yeah, like there is no war without civilians and innocent people getting killed, and their entire bloodline and entire generations getting disrupted because a kid was killed or a mom was killed who was pregnant. Like that stuff is part of war. And if you are somebody saying, I just want to go to the unit that's going to get me into war, like cool for the sake of going to an elite unit, not cool for you just wanting to go to war because you want to scratch this itch you have. Like really think about what war is. And I think because it's so romanticized, young individuals, and I get it, like I say this, I was that individual. I wanted to go to war. I saw Green Berets doing war, and I was like, I want to be on that footing. And if I could go back, I would still want to become a Green Beret, but I would have a much more developed perspective of like what actual war is. It's like cool to do the job for the sake of protecting, for the sake of getting rid of the evil on earth, like for the sake of doing that. But just saying that you want to go to war for the sake of going to war because you want to be able to say that you did it is not a good enough reason, in my opinion.
And just for not to get too philosophical with it, right? You mentioned like, getting rid of the evil in the world, right? So you just told a story. Do you think that we could be seen as the bad people?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, who's determined who the evil on earth is, right?
Yeah. 100%. I mean, from their perspective, let's say you were a kid in Afghanistan and you didn't know that your dad was affiliated with another group. You were just a 5-year-old kid that looked up to his dad just like anywhere else. And these guys with big, loud helicopters flew in and missiles came from the sky and blew up, and your last image of your dad was him missing his limbs. Like, do you think you would think the Americans were the bad guys? I probably would, right? I think And in some instances, you know, we did a lot of good in Afghanistan. Aside from just fighting off the Taliban, like there's a lot of evil there. There's, you know, kids getting raped and kids getting kidnapped and all of this stuff that takes place by largely the individuals who also run those organizations. So by prosecuting those individuals, you know, I think you are ridding the world of some evil, but there's always this misunderstanding or things happen, things go wrong. People who weren't supposed to be injured or part of that do end up getting injured or losing their lives. And there's definitely instances where we're seen as the bad guys, 100%. Sometimes we are the bad guys, right? For, you know, killing civilians. So like, absolutely. I don't have this like sense of America is right in everything that it does. I'm honestly very critical of a lot of what the military industrial complex does. Just as many veterans are. That doesn't mean I don't love our military. It doesn't mean I don't want our military to be as lethal as possible and support the warfighter. But sometimes I have a problem with the guys in suits sitting behind desks making a bunch of money and pulling in checks from sending these dudes to war. So it's a very conflicted stance that I have.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, you know, talk about bad guys over there on that side of the pond, right? There's a lot of that here too, you know, in big cities in America, lots of crime, lots of evil. Down the border, right? There's border missions, lots of cartel drugs being pushed up and human trafficking and smuggling. So I feel like you do not have to join the military, have to go overseas in order to, like, you know, stop the bad guys. I feel like there's plenty of that to go around here too. So
yeah, I think one of the most effective organizations for stopping the bad guys or stopping, you know, potential attacks on the homeland is Border Patrol right now. And we've been seeing a lot of guys come into the program training up for BORTAC or BORSTAR or these elite organizations within Border Patrol. Like, but those dudes are doing their freaking job day in and day out. And I'm not, you know, like, I'm biased. I enjoyed my time in the military, but if you join the military, you're going to get, let's say you're in Special Forces. You're going to go through 2 years of training. You're going to get to a team. You probably will deploy within that first year for 6 months. You'll come back. You'll be in garrison for a year and a half. You'll do a bunch of training, go to these schools. But you'll have that year and a half gap before you go deploy again. And that deployment might be a JSET, a joint training with a partner force where you do training operations in the environment. But as far as like really doing your job and fighting evil, Border Patrol, they're getting after it. Like they are fighting the cartel on the border, like doing operations. You know, our SWAT teams, you know, law enforcement, those guys do their jobs very regularly. It might not be as intense as, you know, an ODA back when Afghanistan was going on. Obviously, it's going to be very different, and that ODA is going to see a lot more direct action or combat. But as far as like doing your job, making an impact on a regular basis, a lot of the federal agencies do a lot on a very consistent basis that you won't necessarily get in the military, even within Ranger Regiment, even within some of the most elite organizations. Those guys that you've never heard of in BORTAC have probably a ton more experience, right? Different training, different funding, but shit ton of experience.
Yeah. So just shift gears a little bit here. Next question is, I know it's different for everyone, but how long on average do you see individuals trained to get ready for SFRE or selection before they actually put the packet in?
Definitely depends on where you're coming in at. If somebody is coming in and let's say they have a 15-minute run time and they have a decent foundation of strength, they can deadlift, 300 pounds for 3, for example. They might be only 8 months away from being like selection ready. Now, if someone comes in and they have a 20-minute run time, they are running 0 miles per week, they might be a year and a half. But typically what we see with guys that are 14, 30 to 20-minute run times is 6 months of like consistent training, quality nutrition before being ready for selection on the low end, and 18 months before being selection ready, depending on their training history. But if someone's running a sub 14-minute 2 mile, they have quality, pretty decent strength. They can potentially move their body weight. They can ruck decent. Like if you have those times in place and you can already run a sub 14 or a sub 40, you're probably only 4 to 6 months away from being pretty competitive at selection with the right training and the right nutrition. Mm-hmm. The problem is, that's a big caveat.
Right, the right training.
The right training is you'll get a lot of guys who are running a 14-minute 2 mile and they're doing CrossFit 5 times a week and they're just crushing themselves with hard runs every other day. They're not tracking their mileage. They're not really tracking their nutrition. And then they'll get 2 months into that 6-month prep and they'll be like, wow, I'm still at 14 minutes. Why? Why am I still at 14 minutes? I'm doing all of this work. And then they'll have a lot of frustration around it. But if you have a structured approach, maybe you're only doing 3 strength days per week. You're focusing on carries. You're focusing on major movement patterns, but you're doing it in a volume that doesn't detract from the training that really matters, which is going to be your runs, rucks, your calisthenics, your prehab movements, your injury prevention, etc. You're training in a way in the gym that supports the performance outside of it. You might be only 4 months away from being, top 25% of the class at selection. Mm-hmm. It just really comes down to you being disciplined with a plan, you being patient enough to not just add CrossFit workouts inside of there. I'm really beating up on it because I see this all the freaking time. And you really prioritizing nutrition and recovery. If you do those things and you impose the right stimulus on your system and then allow for the adaptations to take place, you can see that progress come down pretty quick.
You pretty much just answered the next question too, is what is some of the pitfalls that you see that people run into when training for something like that? And you pretty much covered it, right? Not sticking with the program, adding more stuff than you should be, and just not really narrowing that nutrition in. And
yeah. I think one of the biggest things that I see guys, like one of the biggest mistakes I see guys making when they start training for selection is they say, I'm training for special forces. I have to just crush myself in the gym every day. And then they'll Google special forces workout and it's like 10 rounds of death by burpees or just stuff that is not specific to selection. Selection is an endurance event first. So if your training does not support you building up the mileage, the impact resistance, the ability to move under a load, and the strength work doesn't support that, plus being able to carry weight, low carry, grip strength out at team week, then it's not moving you in the right direction. It's just movement and it's just getting that metabolic conditioning. You'll see all the time guys doing Metcons. I did a 30-minute Metcon today. We did freaking wall balls and handstand walks and all this stuff. It's like, do you think that's actually specific for selection? It might be good to get the anaerobic conditioning and can help support you when you do decide to go into a selection plan, but you have to train specific to the demands that you're going to face in that selection. You can't just expect all training to transfer over.
Yeah. Well, it's just like any other sport, right? If you're on a football team, like you wouldn't be doing basketball drills to train for that. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, train like you fight. This is it. So
and obviously for those that nobody's going to know it, but we recorded half the podcast last one, and then the power went off, and what we were talking about was the word tactical athletes. Sometimes there's like comments online when I'll like post something that says tactical athlete and people will scoff at it, be like, tactical athlete. They treat it like a hybrid athlete. But the reason I like to instill in guys that you are a tactical athlete is it gets them thinking about the end state of what they're training for. If you're just saying you're someone that goes and trains, they're probably going to way overemphasize the stuff that they like to do, which is usually strength. They're going to try to do hypertrophy 5-6 days a week because they're just someone that trains. They're not a tactical athlete. But when I say that someone is a tactical athlete, I want them to believe it because an athlete trains for the domain that they're going to be required to perform in. And when you start saying, I am a tactical athlete, we look at the domain that we're going to require to perform in, and we take that mindset into the gym when we're doing squats, when we're doing deadlifts. It's like, this is not my field of play. This is there to support me in my field of play. So I want guys to take that mindset. And it's kind of like in the book Atomic Habits, where he mentions taking on a different persona for the goal that you want to reach. For example, if someone is wanting to quit smoking, there's two individuals in the example that he gave. One individual, they get offered a cigarette and they say, no thanks, I'm trying to quit smoking. So subconsciously, they still label themselves as a smoker that is just trying to break this habit. Second individual gets offered a cigarette and he says, no thanks, I'm not a smoker. So they changed their persona, or they change their mindset around it, and they are much more likely to actually succeed in breaking the habit of smoking. Same thing with becoming a tactical athlete. If someone's slow and out of shape, but they start thinking that they're a tactical athlete and believing it and taking on that persona, all of a sudden they're tracking their macros. All of a sudden they're, looking at how much sleep they're getting on a daily basis. They're cutting out caffeine before 2 p.m. They're hitting their training sessions on a consistent basis. Like, they start to embody that of somebody who performs in that specific domain.
Mm-hmm. Well said. You feel strongly about that?
I do, yeah. I don't think I've ever talked about that, but I see it all the time. Like, tactical athlete, another freaking gimmick. And yeah, to an extent it is, but it's much more powerful than just saying I'm a hybrid athlete, I'm a tactical athlete. Same thing applies to a hybrid athlete. You think someone that labels themselves as a hybrid athlete is more likely to go out and run and do their lifts on a consistent basis versus someone that just says I train. Mm-hmm. Like, what's the alternative? I do fitness. I train.
Yeah. Not even train. I work out.
Yeah. So like, when we take on those kind of gimmicky, phrases, sometimes there is value in that because we start to believe it.
Yeah. 100% mindset right there. I was going to tie this next question with the last one, but I can't remember how. But you said something. I was like, oh, that's perfect. So when do you know if an injury is healed or not?
This is a great question, because what often happens is guys expect them to say, okay, let's say if someone hurts their ankle or they're coming back from Achilles tendonitis. So they lower the volume, then they start keeping, they do some 2-to-1 calf raises or some eccentric calf raises. They start gradually loading it. They increase the reps. They start getting into running again. They get 5-10 minutes in. And let's say the PT was like, hey, your recovery is going to take 8 weeks. Well, they might do it for 8 weeks, wait for 8 weeks, and then at that 8-week mark, they think that they're fully healed and they're jump back into their 20-mile-per-week plan. And then guess what happens? They go above that subtolerance threshold, create a lot of inflammation in it, and set themselves back even further. I did this time and time again, so I know this like cycle of the plateaued athlete very well. But you're never just going to know like you're good, right, until you do a confidence run or ruck. But the way that you want to do it is, let's say you have an injury, reduce the volume. One, go see a PT if it's something serious, obviously. Disclaimer, right? But if you have an injury like Achilles tendonitis or shin splints, for example, reduce the volume, give it some rest to let the initial inflammation, kind of dissipate. Get some light exposure, some light stimulus, some tib raises, some calf raises, some gradual loading, keeping it subtolerance, meaning we're not doing it to pain. And then you start gradually building up the miles again. You start, maybe I like to really do it with like zone 2 runs for time. So maybe we'll do 3 sets of 3 minutes running at an easy pace, 2 minutes walking. You'll do that. And if you feel good that day, you cut it off. You don't just keep running until you feel like shit. You be disciplined with it. Maybe, 3 days from now or 2 days from now, you'll do 4 sets. Maybe you'll do a 15-minute, continuous zone 2 run. Maybe you'll do an 18, 21, 25, 30. And then once you get to that like 45, 60 mark of being able to run continuously, pretty good indication that you're mostly healed. But then you do that same thing with the speed sessions. You'll start with 2 intervals of 400-meter repeats at 80%, and then you'll gradually increase it. So there's not going to be this point where you're like, oh, I'm healed, I can jump back into 100% volume. When you get injured, you have to build back into it, and then once you're back at that, regular training volume and you're feeling good, no pain, you kept it subtolerance getting up to that point, it's a pretty good indication that you're no longer injured.
You don't have to start from square one. Like, your body still has like those neurological adaptations that you can, start. It's not like you're going back to like when you first started, but you still gotta give it that window of, hey, we're gonna start doing this again.
Yeah, and understand that the reason why you're reducing the volume isn't to reduce all the stimulus for your cardiovascular system, is to reduce the impact on that specific injury area. So if you do, let's say you're somebody that's been doing 60-minute zone 2 sessions and you're doing 3 by, 3-minute run, 2-minute walk, so 15 minutes total of zone 2 work, go jump on the bike afterwards. There's nothing saying that you can't backfill with low impact conditioning. Go swim, go, walk on an incline treadmill walk if it's still subtolerance. Go, go cross train and use that to continue developing that cardiovascular system. So when you do get to the impact resistance, you've made progress cardiovascularly, and you're still going to see progress with your times.
Hell yeah. And for our last question, what is the benefit of doing longer slow rucks versus faster intense ones?
So I primarily like to do longer slow rucks, especially for individuals that are a little bit further out from selection. The goals with these rucks is, one, to condition the feet. Obviously, guys getting blisters is one of the biggest reasons why they don't pass their runs and rucks, or rucks rather. And then 2 is to get the exposure and the time under a load. So those are the big reasons why we want to primarily focus on longer, slower rucks, is to get that conditioning, really build that foundation. As someone's getting closer to selection, then we can start doing things like ruck intervals. Maybe you do, a mile ruck run, mile walk. Maybe you do a 4-mile ruck for time, etc. Like, you increase the intensity, and that's where we work on the gait or the airborne shuffle that we talked about in a previous or recent podcast. You work on the impact resistance of being able to run and not develop those overuse injuries or issues with your Achilles, your tibs, etc. And you get that exposure of being able to move under a ruck. You figure out how the ruck rubs, you figure out all of that stuff, and then obviously get the cardiovascular benefits from it. But we don't need to sit there and ruck run all day long to improve your ruck capacity. Focus primarily longer, slower rucks, building up that foundation, building up that conditioning, and then as you're getting closer, you can start mixing in ruck intervals, shorter, higher intensity rucks, which is going to help you drive down that pace overall. I wouldn't necessarily do it until you're like 12 weeks out from a course, though. Cool. But yeah, I mean, it's just going to, there's guys that walk only ruck the majority of their training and then go crush it at selection. But I like to get the running rucks to get the different conditioning on your feet, because your boots might rub a little bit differently. It's going to be a harder effort. The rucksack might shift and rub you in different areas. You got to get the airborne shuffle down. You got to figure out all these things. So those are the benefits of ruck running, in addition to the cardiovascular benefits of, or the conditioning benefits of actually moving the weight that quickly. But it's not like you need to ruck run perpetually to drive down your ruck paces. We really want to focus on the conditioning first.
Yeah. Well, sweet, man. Sounds good. That's what I got for you today.
Awesome. Appreciate you guys watching. If you made it this far. If you guys want a custom plan, we got a couple slots open currently. There's a link down in the description to check it out. Other than that, see you guys next week.